Very warm welcome to all of you. I'm Chaya from Vetiver, and we are one of the behavior change partners to SIF's Unnat Kheti project. I welcome you to this discussion, which is being held on the occasion of World Soil Day 2021. I'm really pleased to have with us right now great experts on soil who are working across the ecological and social dimensions of soil. We have with us Dr. Madhu, Director of the ICAR Indian Institute of Soil and Water Conservation. We have Dr. Bhojwet. He is the retired PCCF of Haryana and a forestry soil scientist with IORA Ecological Solutions. We have Mr. Dharmendra with us. He's the thematic lead training science with the team at RYSS, and he's joined within the Natural Farming Coalition Network. Lee Ann Winowicki, she's the theme leader for soil and land health at C4ICRAF. We have Mr. Naveen Patidar, he's the Chief Operating Officer at AKRSPI. And Ishan Agarwal, he's the General Manager of Programs at Foundation for Ecological Security. I welcome you all, and I'll just give you a very quick introduction of Project Unnat Kheti. It is a low-carbon agriculture project which is working on climate change mitigation and building climate resilience of smallholder farmers in MP, UP, and Gujarat. Project partners are AKF, AKRSPI, FES, NCNF, C4ICRAF, and Vetiver. Unnat Kheti project is taking integrated approaches to improve soil health with various interventions that range across commons restoration, biodiversity protection, water management, livestock management, and renewable energy. I'd like to begin with some opening questions for each of our speakers here today. I will start with Dr. Bhojwet. Bhojwet, the theme of this year's Soil Health Day, as you know, is soil salinization. So I have a question for you about what role you think, because you've had deep expertise in forestry, what role do you think forests have in restoring agricultural landscapes?
Thank you very much, Chaya. And let me say with all proud that as a company, IORA, we have recently done a survey of landscape destruction in Haryana. And what we found in Haryana, which seems to be a food bowl for almost India for the last, I can say 50 years, that each and every inch of Haryana, the agricultural land, is suffering from either salinity or alkalinity, So the theme is, which has been, taken for this year, is very, very pertinent. And similarly, the other states, Punjab, also are having the same issues. Question you asked me that trees improve or forests improve the soil, or they can restore the productivity of a degraded landscape. Well, it's a folk wisdom, and we all know that from different parts of the world, whether it is Africa or Americas or in Asia's, we as humans, we have been clear felling forest and then going to there to do agriculture, do couple of or tens of or 15s of the crop cycles. By that time, the productivity goes down, and there is a fallow phase. And fallow phase means coming up of the trees and the weeds and understory by the simple process of succession, which improves the productivity of these lands. And this system has been followed by humans all over the world for centuries, and even now in the northeast part of India. But unfortunately, the cycle fallow period has become very, very small. So that causes the problem. But anyway, unscientifically, by common knowledge, is answers the question that trees as such and group of trees are a ecosystem which is dominated by trees. The forest has the innate ability to restore, the productivity of soils. So I call this particular type of forestry as restoration forestry. Talking about science, it is as simple as that my colleagues who are experts from ICR and other who have done most of the time, agriculture and soil, organic carbon as such is the blood and flesh of the soil, And in most of these systems, when degradation happens, whether it's salinity, alkalinity, or aridity at large, or other systems, it is loss of organic carbon, which is the first step in which, the degradation happens. What trees do, once they start accumulating biomass, they also provide a microclimate to the system as such, which has been degraded by anthropocentric or other kind of activities. And that results into, setting up of natural cycles of biomass accumulation, litter fall, its recycling, and that all together results into, improvement of the productivity of the soil. When I say productivity of the soil, that means the improvement of chemical, biological, and physical properties of the soil. They are improved. For example, once you have that setup of system in which canopy is closing, you have a different temperature, which is ambient temperature as opposed to the outside temperature on that soil. It also results in the development of biodiversity in the soil, which is we call as soil scientists as the microbial biomass and different kind of other small animals, basically zooplanktons and other nematodes which are growing into the soil, and they result into a faster turnover of the litter, adding it to the quality of it. Once you have organic matter into the soil, that also results or affects the moisture holding capacity, which is very, very important for restoring the productivity of the soil, because otherwise you have too wet or too dry of soils, which result into lowering of its productivity or loss of productivity as such. And finally, I'll say that touching to this year's theme, stop salinity and increase productivity, we have at least a couple of maybe more case studies from our part of the world in India. The Indo-Gangetic Plains, largely on the one side of Grand Trunk Road, which will be probably understood by my colleagues who are from India, on the right-hand side of the Grand Trunk Road. They were once all covered with the forest of Butea monosperma and Linia grandis. These are not very economically important species, but definitely these were trees, and they were maintaining the health of that soil. What happens that during the Mughal time, first a Badshai Canal or the Royal Canal was built, and later on, subsequently during the British time, a very integrated system of canals, which is an example all over the world, as close to what you see around Aswan Dam in Egypt and all that, that is built. And all of a sudden, this whole area is felt of its trees, and people start doing agriculture. And for decades and almost centuries, this has been food boil of the nation, Haryana, Punjab, and Western UP, where in two rotations, wheat and rice was grown. But ultimately, as is the theme of this year's Soil Health Day, secondary salinization, because of so many factors. Social among them is we have very, very small farmers. Then, the innate nature of those soils, the high content of, salts, and the low precipitation and high pen transpiration has resulted into salinity and alkalinity. And as a result, I think close to 7 million hectares of land in these areas is suffering from this,
Thank you so much, sir. Dr. Madhu from ICAR, Indian Institute of Soil and Water Conservation, sir. Thank you so much for joining us today. You write a lot about preventing loss of soil nutrients. And since the Unnat Kheti project is promoting a lot of natural farming practices, if you could please share your thoughts on the role of biofertilizers or bio-inputs and how you feel they might restore soil health, sir.
Yeah, Dhanyavad. Thank you. Namaskar sabko. Namaskar from Indian Institute of Soil and Water Conservation. The Indian Institute of Soil and Water Conservation, it is located in 9 locations at the pan-India level. We work on soil and water conservation technology for the sustainable production. That is our vision. Yes, we know that actually globally we are having 15% of the total geographical area. It is degraded. We are about 37% of the total geographic area, it is degraded. And the water erosion is the major contribution. Of course, the other form of degradation is the salinity, alkalinity, and acid soil and mining and other things. And whatever the sedimentation which carried from the catchment area at the global level, it is about 25 billion tons it is removed from the on-site. Yes, again, but the country is contributing about 20% of the global the sediment delivery. Of course, the impact is concerned, we are losing the 9% at the global level, particularly the production is concerned, but India as such, we are losing about 16%. And the expected siltation rate more than 1.2% for nearly 5,000 big dams in the country. Of course, the lifespan, it is varied from reduction in the lifespan to the extent of 8 to 53 years. And once the erosion degradation is there, normally it removes the valuable nutrient to the extent of 8 to 11 million tons, the costing to the extent of 38 to 45,000 crores of rupees. And we are losing annually about 115 tons of carbon in this process. And the carbon emission raised to the extent of 34.6 million ton. Of course, these are the negative impact. And at the country level, we are losing 2.54% of the GDP due to the degradation problem. If you talk about the cost of action and inaction is concerned, 1 rupee today, if you are not taking action, we may lose 1 rupee 80 paise. Our cost of inaction will be much more. If we are not spending 1 rupee today, we may lose nearly 2 rupee 50 paise in future to come. And one of our study, particularly in the shifting cultivated area, where the reference carbon of native forest and man-made forest compared with the shifting cultivated area with respect to the soil carbon is concerned, it takes more than 50 to 70 years to regain the carbon equivalent to the natural forest and man-made forest. That means to say that that much long period is required. Of course, we know the land degradation drivers are many, particularly loss of vegetation cover, landscape disturbance, unscientific land use, socio-economic aspects and other things. And of course, the potential of various soil and water conservation technology is concerned. The annually it is varies from nearly 0.1 to even up to 1 tons per hectare carbon sequestration potentials are there annual basis, particularly in the low carbon agriculture is concerned. Of course, the country is spending much more subsidy, particularly on the fertilizer subsidy and power subsidy. Even the part of it, even less than 10% of it, if it is diverted for the degradation treatment, definitely we are in a position to do it. Let us come to the soil is as concerned. Soil is an entity of 3 brothers and 3 sisters. What is that? That is sand, silt, and clay. It is bounded by its mother or parent, that is organic matter. It forms soil aggregates. Nowadays, because of the nuclear family, the silt is separated, sand is separated, clay is separated, and parents also separated. That means the old parents also living separated without separate from the children. That means to say that our social life, it is not differ from the soil as such. I will put it, these 3 brothers, it is united by the organic matter, that is the major role. And of course, the soil is considered to be the much more biodiverse living entity, where organic matter is the basic fundamental material which support the diversity is concerned. The nowadays, because of the various factors and other thing, organic matter content is decreasing. That is the main concern for the land degradation. Let us come to the microorganism is concerned. Biofertilizer, role of biofertilizer is concerned. The biofertilizer play a major role in the sense these are the microorganisms already they were there in the soil, but The indiscriminate use of fertilizers and plant protection chemical, agrochemicals, they destroy. That means to say that they run away from the home. That means to say that they are not getting the food. Food means only the organic matter, not the nitrogen or phosphorus and potassium. That means to say that if you provide the food, then only whatever the animal it is there, even in our house, either कुत्ता है और बिल्ली है, चूहे हैं, खाना मिलेगा तो रहेगा, नहीं है तो दौड़ेगा. In the same way, most of the microorganisms ran out from the cultivated field. Let us come to that, how we to build up. If at all we wanted to build up microorganisms for the sustainability, we have to follow the low external input sustainable agriculture, LISA. That means to say that don't depend much on the external input, use only the optimum quantity of inorganic fertilizer and promote much more inorganic the fertilizers and manures, so that the soil can be bring back to the original level. That is the much more focus, but it is a potential with respect to the carbon sequestration, climate mitigation through the carbon sequestration in the soil, since it contains nearly 2,500 billion tons of carbon, which is much more than what is there in the atmosphere. Atmosphere, it contains only 800 billion, and put together plants and animals, it contains only 560 billion. That means to say that the soil is having a greater potential to sequester, particularly the mitigation of the climate change. With this, I will stop my introductory. Thank you very much. Dhanyavad.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद sir. Thank you so much for this wonderful information. I'm sure a lot of things were new for us, just like from Bhojwit sir also earlier. Now I will request Lee Winowicki from C4ICRAF to please offer her introductory remarks. And specifically, Lee, I'd love for you to share your thoughts on how low carbon agriculture interventions can support climate change mitigation and resilience in India, specifically for smallholder farmers. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you to our ICAR representative teaching us about the 3 brothers and 2 sisters of soil. That was really enlightening. So I look forward to following up on that. So yes, and thank you for the opportunity to highlight really the exciting momentum around building soil health for food system transformation, including low carbon agriculture. So as you said, I'm Lee Winowicki, and I lead the Soil and Land Health Global Research Team at C4ICRAF, and I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. And as the previous 2 speakers mentioned, that over 25% of the Earth's surface is degraded, and global emissions are on the rise. So continuing business as usual will severely limit our ability to produce nutritious food, not to mention our capacity to mitigate and adapt to climate change. Therefore, we must transform the way we produce our food and the way we treat our soil. And I think that's why we're here today for World Soil Day. And I think when we talk about low carbon agriculture, we really want to talk about agricultural systems that emit less carbon or greenhouse gases and store more carbon. So you can think about low carbon a couple different ways, and you could also think about healthy soil ecosystems and take carbon out of the air. And I think that there are a few steps that we can take to make a positive difference. So I'll just highlight these 3 steps. So one is about this multi-stakeholder action. So this project is a beautiful example. If you look at all the partners and expertise involved to really come together to scale soil health globally with a focus on low carbon agriculture. Also, I think several partners here were part of the UN Food System Summit. And we actually have the Coalition of Action for Soil Health, which is about bringing together private sector, governments, research, development, and pharma organizations to scale globally soil health practices by addressing key barriers that need to overcome. The second thing is that when we're talking about low carbon agriculture, because it is so broad and can be interpreted in so many different ways, we need to make sure that farmers are encouraged to tailor interventions to meet his or her needs. So we really need to encourage farmer innovation, because as we know, there is no silver bullet. There's no one technology that works for everyone everywhere. And finally, we really need to invest in strategic monitoring of soil and land health. So C4ICRAF has been implementing a systematic and robust framework, which will also be used in this project to assess land and soil health indicators. And this is important, one, because we can establish a baseline for targeting and prioritizing interventions, but secondly, to track how the interventions are impacting the soil ecosystem. So for example, tracking if we are storing more carbon in the soil, are we emitting less? Are we having higher biomass production? So those are my three opening remarks. And then I'm sure everyone, I think this is the right audience, everyone is here is familiar with Dr. Ratan Lal, who's actually the co-lead of the Coalition of Action for Soil Health and the 2020 World Food Prize laureate, native to India as well. And he has a mantra, and it says that healthy soil equals healthy food, equals healthy people and animals, equals a healthy ecosystem and a healthy planet. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lee. I will now welcome someone who's practicing incredible soil science practices within his own network. So I'll invite Dharmendraji from RYSS, the thematic lead for training science, and to share his experiences on soil health. Specifically, Dharmendraji, what are the specific challenges that you face and the opportunities that you see vis-a-vis natural farming? Because that's something that you've been championing for a while.
Thank you. Good afternoon. First of all, thank you for having me here. And I'm very glad to spend time with all those who share the same concern. So coming to your question, actually, we have a situation, what we call a soil emergency. So India is losing 16 tons of soil per hectare per year. And it has remained the same level for the past 33 years, which is saying that we are not doing anything or enough in that direction. So India has a landmass of 3.29 million square kilometers, and it's losing 5 billion tons of soil per year. When you compare that with world landmass, which is 148.9 million square kilometers, the world is losing 24 billion tons per year. But India has 2.2% of world landmass, but we are losing 23% of soil lost in the world. So this is what we are calling a soil emergency. At this rate, we are desertifying faster than the rest of the world. So when we have to think about opportunities and what are the challenges to make use of these opportunities, the mainstream discussion on soil carbon is not enough, and it has not yielded very good results and significant changes in how we are able to control the situation. We mostly focus on plant nutrients, NPK and all, but soil carbon is much more vital. So our efforts are not focused on increasing the soil carbon levels. And we started to believe that in India's tropical climate, it is hard to maintain higher levels of soil carbon, and we cannot do much about it. So we kind of shrugged off from the responsibility end. So even many scientists are surprised to when they hear that soil carbon is 4% in this soil. They simply just dismiss that. In India, it cannot be like that. So there is some mind block here that it is possible to increase soil carbon, and we should do something about it. Okay, so when we think of opportunities to increase soil carbon, we stop at the discussion of farmyard manure. 12 to 15 tons of farmyard manure per hectare per year is what is recommended nationally. But since we do not have enough cattle to provide that much of FOM, and it is difficult to supply that much, and therefore we have nothing else to do. We are resource constrained. So that is the despondency that we can see. So what we at RYSS, when we are studying natural ecosystems, and what we figured out how plants react with interact with ecosystem, other factors, when we see that there are amazing ways where nature increases soil carbon. If you study some natural forests, you'll see a lot of plant diversity. There is a lot of biomass availability, so there is no transportation of required biomass to the needy place. So it is always happening naturally. So the recycling of biomass, the disintegration, and again nutrients getting accessed by plants and taken up by other animals, that is all happening. So what we are looking at is, in order to correct all these problems, soil is a very important resource, because so many livelihoods are dependent on agricultural productivity. So it is important to maintain soil, and we have to arrest all erosion and all. So if there is soil carbon, enough soil carbon in soil, the structure changes. And when structure changes, soil structural stability is attained. Okay, so the structure has stability and it is water resistant, and it can absorb any amount of water. Otherwise, if there is no structure, it is just like a powdery amorphous thing, and it gets washed off when it rains. So it has to be like sponge, and a lot of carbon is needed. How do you pump carbon into the soil? And it's like somebody said that for greatest problems, the solutions are embarrassingly very simple. So we look at the process of photosynthesis. So when a plant is undergoing photosynthesis and all, so it takes, we all know the basics, what are taken up and what are given. It makes use of carbon dioxide in the air, and in the presence of sunlight, sugars are formed. So how how a plant budgets, how this for these photosynthetes should be used. If you look at that, so these photosynthetes are very rich in carbon, because primary gas is carbon dioxide. So 40% of photosynthetes are used for shoot development, bearing branches, leaves, twigs, flowers, fruits, all of that. % for root branching and all. And another 30 to 40% is just leaked out through roots. So scientists wondered, if the leak doesn't happen and it is converted into plant biomass, the yields would be even higher. But in nature, there is a purpose for everything, and plants release these valuable carbonaceous substances on purpose. So from there, soil food web kicks start. Okay, so small bacteria accumulate around root hairs. They eat up the sugars and mobilize water and nutrients to the plant roots, and some interaction and interdependence happens there. So from bacteria, nematodes and all, bugs and all birds. So before above ground soil food web starts, below ground soil food web is already happening. And these, if you try to exploit this phenomena of converting gaseous carbon dioxide into solid carbon through photosynthesis, your lookout will be very different. So our farmers have been just growing crops to keep the living root activity continual. Okay, so scientists have estimated that when a plant is releasing these carbonaceous substances at various depths, because roots are extending into various depths, so the carbon sequestration is 5 to 30 times faster than when you apply organic residues on the surface. So living plants, the cover cropping is a very important thing, and also the diversity of crops in a farm. So the productivity of a farm depends on how many different functional groups of plants are there. It has to be legumes, cereals, trees, and all. And in agriculture, Indian agriculture, farmers and scientists are all like, trees should not be there. So that is a mental block that we have. We are not integrate trees enough. So that is one thing. And we should have integration of trees and agricultural crops. And we have to see that organic matter is available in situ. If you are growing 10 to 12 crops, there will be a lot of leaf fall, there will be a lot of root biomass, which will eventually become soil carbon. And to catalyze all these processes, you make use of biostimulants. Biostimulants are again simple preparations: cow dung, cow urine, some jaggery, increase the population of beneficial microbes and apply in the soil. So this kind of practices have shown tremendous impact in sustaining crop growth. So we are able to exploit this phenomena, and we started growing crops in fallow months also. So we have a cropping intensity of 1.26 Andhra Pradesh. Gross crop area, only 25% of land is going for a second crop. In all the months, that is all left fallow. If you plant something, even if you don't harvest, you keep this pump of converting gaseous carbon into solid soil carbon. So that goes on, and we have now developed models like 65 days green cover. So soil should not be left fallow. Soil should be always covered with crops. Soil should be protected. Soil should have a lot of carbon, and soil should have a lot of living root activity. So our all models across all agroclimatic regions, we have exploited this phenomena of photosynthesis for the benefit of natural ecosystems productivity. So with this, I close my remarks.
Thank you very much, Dharmendra. With that, I now request Ishan from Foundation for Ecological Security to please offer a very important dimension to this, which is the socio-ecological dimension. FES has been working on commons restoration under the Unnat Kheti project. Ishan, if you could please share your thoughts on how the community management of commons can actually improve the soil health for everyone, as well as help the smallholder farmers.
Thanks, Chaya. And greetings for World Soil Day. So I would start by saying that we are a nation of smallholders. Most of our farmers, they have very small land holdings or marginal land holdings, and most of them are also subsistence farmers. Therefore, they produce a large part of the produce is actually for themselves. And that is also true for several of our low carbon agriculture project sites. So why I am saying that is when we talk about soil, when we talk about one single farmer, she might have some 0.5 acre or 1 acre or 2 acre of plot. And she may do some kind of soil moisture conservation, soil conservation work on her land. But she would again need support of her fellows, her community, to actually, make impact on the issue of soil loss, and would also depend upon the benefits, meaning even if she has to reap the benefits of natural farming, she has to have some kind of collectives, some kind of sharing of resources established. So that is an important part of any kind of intervention when we talk about any of the natural resources, soils is included. The other thing that I wanted to emphasize is upon the importance of the landscape and the sustainability of the landscape put together, where you have forests, pastures, water bodies, hills, all part of the system, which we call larger agroecology, which influence the success of a farmer who is taking the risk of becoming moving towards natural farming. So that is the essential biophysical infrastructure that is needed for ensuring that there are nutrient flows to the farm established, and then there is community who acts as stewards of natural resources, which ensures that there is judicious use of natural resources, whether it is forest, water, or pastures, or even soil, and acts as a balance against the individual greed. So that is the role I think that communities have to play, and our role there in terms of building such communities which have a tradition of stewardship on natural resources. Soil, for example, or any other natural resource, it is not just about what the farmer is doing on her land. It is also about externalities. So, for example, if there is a lot of sand mining happening around a village or a cluster of villages, it would affect the entire ecosystem, and it would affect the economy, the sociology of the area, and also the agriculture in the area. Many of man-made landscape degradation causes ravine formation, let's say. So if and thereby impacting the soil erosion process. So or meaning giving healthy soil away for brick kilns for making bricks. So these are several things which are collective or landscape level governance kind of institutions may tackle and work with several other government departments to ensure that there is natural resources are conserved well and are contributing, that system is contributing into what we are calling low carbon agriculture. We all know that IPCC this time has actually acknowledged that the communities as stewards, and if there is tenurial security for communities over commons, it helps. It is also one pathway for mitigating and adapting to climate change. We must understand the value of all this and see how communities govern their lands and soils better, and how can we support them in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ishan. We'll come back to Commons conversation in a few more minutes. I will now invite Naveen Patidar, who's the Chief Operating Officer of AKRSPI. He has worked extensively across India, and I'm sure MP and Gujarat specifically, and he's been leading a lot of low carbon agriculture interventions. Naveen bhai, if I could please ask you to share some key interventions that you have seen or that you are undertaking that you feel can have the maximum benefits to the soil in the short term.
So good evening, everyone, and happy World Soil Health Day. In a light mode, I would say that low carbon agriculture it can be replaced with even the high carbon agriculture. So we need low carbon in atmosphere, but we need very high carbon in soils. So in fact, our regular term is low carbon agriculture, but we should also keep in mind that soil requires high carbon. So our context is degraded, hilly, rain-fed, semi-arid regions. And for a large part of AKRSP's experience, we were focused on soil conservation, forestry, water harvesting, water conservation, that kind of work. I would say soil conservation is just maybe the beginning of what we ultimately want to achieve is the total soil health. And because total soil health is, it requires much more interventions than just the conservation. So conservation is of course the first step. We reduce loss of carbon. So once you reduce the soil erosion, it automatically means that we are stopping the loss of carbon from the soils. So we know that because of this degraded hilly regions, lot of soils just erode with the rainfall. It means that if there is 100 kg of soil which erode, then even if there is 1% carbon in that, then that 1 kg of carbon is eroded. That means 3.67 kg of carbon dioxide. So in that way, the first step is soil conservation. The second is, of course, how we reduce the emission of carbon from the soils. So whether we reduce it through reduction in the deep tillage, or we reduce the chemical usage, maybe chemical fertilizers or pesticides, or any other practice which is leading to emission of carbons from the farms. So, and the third one is, of course, how we achieve the sequestration of carbon from atmosphere to the soils. So these are, in my view, 3 critical steps to achieve total soil health. So reduction in soil erosion. Second is reduction in the emission of carbon from the soil. And third one is, of course, sequestration of carbon from atmosphere to the soil. Now for AKRSP, one of the critical centrality is farmers' welfare, and whether farmers have something to achieve if we are to rehabilitate soil health. One of the most unfortunate part is that for a long period of time, soil health is understood just in its chemical properties. So I think previous speakers also explained it very well, that our soil health card scheme or any other training which has been imparted to farmers, it is all around nutrients in the soils. And that is how our soil health card and whole program has been designed. But unfortunate part is that we have omitted 2 other critical parts. One is physical and the second one is biological. So until and unless we explain farmers soil health in totality, which includes chemical health of the soil, the physical health of the soil, and biological health of the soil, the advantage of explaining other 2 parts is that it do not require laboratory test. So farmers can very visually assess these things on their farms. So for example, AKRSP has done a great amount of work on integrating conservation agriculture with natural farming practices. So what we have done is we have integrated 3 principles of conservation agriculture: minimum tillage in the soils, cover on the soils, crop rotation within natural farming practices, which have been explained by RYSS colleague, that we use the all the preparations which can increase the microbiological microbial activities in the soils. So if we combine natural farming practices with conservation agriculture, then I think at least I have found this as one of the most significant practice which leads to all 3 objectives and improvement in all 3 properties for achieving the total soil health. And as I was saying, that farmers themselves, we see on the ground that they can very easily assess that whether the earthworms have come back in the soil, whether there is improved structure in terms of porosity in the soil, water holding capacities of the soil, water infiltration rates of the soil. And organic matter is, of course, the easiest thing to observe in the soils. So as soon as farmers start observing that the organic matter is accumulating in the soil, which is leading to increase in earthworms, which is leading to further increase in, let us say, increase in microbial activities, plus improved physical structure of the soil. Then, irrespective of whether laboratory tests are done on the soil or not, farmers themselves will start seeing the benefits of all these low carbon or sustainable practices which we do with farmers. And in fact, now we are working with maybe more than 50,000 farmers. Maybe not all farmers are adopting all these practices, but our studies, our case studies, our ground level observations, and published research suggests that in the first year itself, the farm starts reduction in the emission of carbon dioxide. So then it starts giving the benefits of improved soil health. So in a way, I would say that my conclusion is that soil health has to be seen in totality. Our soil health program has to be very simple, which can be understood by farmers. The third can be, nowadays I see that livestock or cow has been made very mandatory part of maybe whole soil health improvement program, but we should give equal importance to earthworms. And many times we very lightly says that earthworms are small cows. So rather than one cow, just focusing on just one cow, we can focus on thousands and lakhs and crores of earthworms in soils, and they will act as small cows in the soils.
Thank you so much for such an incredible insight on soil health in India. And of course, soil, as you all know much better, can take years of discussion to arrive at, what is the right way to restore it, because there's just so many things one can do. And we're very lucky to have a great group of experts. We work as supporters to this program with farmers directly to support behavior change. I'm going to direct my first question at Dr. Madhu from ICAR. On one side, we are losing soil really rapidly, as Dharmenji and everyone has pointed out. On the other side, we're also facing extreme climate events, whether it's extreme rain or heat waves, etc. Now, you discussed the importance of biofertilizers, bioinputs, etc., to restore soil nutrients. I'm wondering if you have any insight as to how climate change resilience of smallholder farmers could be enhanced, and how one use of biomass or bioinputs around to actually enable them to reduce vulnerability. I wonder if you have any thoughts about that, Dr. Madhu?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, some of the beloved speaker also, it is mentioned that ours is a small holders or marginal landholder agriculture. That means to say that one कहानी बोलते हैं, आज जीने हैं you go for annual crop, कल जीने हैं you go for the perennial crop. नहीं, sorry, आज जीने हैं you go for seasonal crop, कल जीने हैं you go for perennial crop, annual one, and जिंदगी पूरा जीने हैं you have to go for the perennial crop like the tree and animal. The particularly some of our esteemed speaker also has mentioned that the personally I consider the farmer without any animals. You will not to be considered as a farmer, he is considered to be a bunny, because normally they will treat the soil entity as a commercial angle not as an entity of a production system as part of the family members. In that way, even in a small piece of land, we should have an annual crop to meet out the sustainable food to the family members. That it should be a mixed component, not as a nano component. That is one. And the second component is that the tree component should be there, either on the field burn or on wider spaced, the widely spaced crop. Why I am talking and coupled with some of the animal component. Either we talk about the cows or buffalo or some of the ruminant like goats and sheep. And let us link to how the climate mitigation it will be there. First of all, actually, climate mitigation with respect to the soil is concerned. The first and foremost thing is to retain the soil on the on-site itself. How we will do it? It is not possible by only growing crops alone, particularly in the medium to steep slope. That definitely we need a suitable conservation technology that we talk about the soil and water conservation technologies, where where inbuilt mechanism of both conservation of the soil will be there, and also what we talk about the costly nutrient and also the carbon buildup, it will be taking place. This is the first and foremost thing. Until unless we do this practice, either bunding or stone bunding or whatever the thing, or vegetative means of using some of the grasses and other thing, and also particularly in the steep slope, we advocate the bench terraces. This is the first and foremost thing. Try whatever the thing, whatever the indigenous or improved technology you may adopt to retain the soil on the site. That is the first and foremost thing. The second part is that let us come to the second part is that the crop. The crop, normally the farmer, they will forget about the suitability factor, the soil suitability of the crop based on the soil and also the particular the climate driven climatic condition is concerned. Normally some of the farmers, they will go behind the market driven approach. Sometimes even the crop is demanding much more water, normally it may not be suit to that particularly rain-fed condition or irrigated condition. Because of the market-oriented driven crop, the farmers, the forced to go for that kind of crop, and they will end up with a sort of a demotivated, because the ability to support the crop from the soil, it is limited, both in terms of nutrient and also in terms of the water. For that purpose, actually, you assess the capability of your soil and choose your, based on your available resources, you choose your best crop and cropping pattern. That is most important. After that, the secondly, within the cropping system, I would like to advise you go for a mixture of annual crop in order to overcome the risk, particularly in the climate aberrations. Because we should have normally, even if you go to the tribal belt or in the elite track, even a single piece of land, even we will find 4 to 5 crop minimum. And as a scientist, we are unable to understand when sometimes if the water is available, the crop will be there 24/7, the one or the other crop will be there. And as a scientist, we are astonished when these people, they will going to harvest and when the new crop is sown, particularly in the Koraput backward districts of tribal district of in Orissa. If you go, it is a wonderful area to see this kind of cropping practices in a small piece of land. They will be having 24/7. Their target is each week they are having a market, and they wanted to have a produce for the each week. That means to say that the continuous flow of the money flow will be there either from the irrigated land or from the rain-fed land. And the third point I would like to mention here is that how to increase the organic carbon. That definitely it has to be produced around the house, either from the animal, growing animals and other things, or it has to be supported from the trees or any other crop it is grown within the field or in the field boundaries. That should be the major concept. The farmer, they cannot purchase this organic manure and they cannot cultivate. Once we talk about the DFI, doubling farmer income and other things, we should try our level best to minimize the cost of production and enhance the return. How we will do it? It has to be done only to produce your own input from your own piece of land and also the backyard or front yard of your the living, that is house, so that the whatever the animal waste are there, it has to be recycled, just like what we use Ayurvedic medicine, what we use. In the similar way, we have to follow the Ayurveda of soil health management through use of these the plant residues and also the animal residue. Either you decompose it or vermicompost it, whatever may the case. We have the technology that you can do it. That means to say that we are building up resilience and also the response capacity of the soil. Whatever the little amount of fertilizer or any external purchased input if you had, the soil is in a position to respond it. That is more important. What we talk about the efficiencies part is concerned. That means either nitrogen use efficiency or P or K or micronutrient is efficiency is concerned, because these are the costly nutrients. Once we increase the responsive and resilience capacity of the soil, that definitely the recovery and efficiency will be more, both for the nutrient and also the water. And with respect to the climate is concerned, I would like to advise, particularly to the small farmers also, to have a small farm pond in their land. The normally, particularly even either in the MP or Chhattisgarh or many states, the normally the farm pond is a must, just like what we have fridge in our house. In the similar pattern, we should have farm pond in our the land in order to harvest the excess water and to recycle during the critical period of the crop, so that the crop failure will be minimum, and it should act as a contingency plan. Suppose if the water is available during the post-monsoon season, it can be used for the multi-purpose, that means the fish farming and other things. And secondly, this also can be recycled for the small scale vegetable, off-season vegetable cultivations and other things, so that the nutrition status of the farmers, and also you will get some surplus vegetables during the off-season to sell it out. And the third point I would like to add, I was talking about the tree component. Why it is a tree component? The tree component because even during the climate change phenomena, in the drought or flood or whatever the extreme event it is happened, the tree it is in a position to withstand for certain time a sort of a drought conditions or extreme heat condition, and at least it is in a position to produce a reasonable amount of productivity, so that the farmer is in a position to scope up the mechanism, this climate negative impact of the climate mechanism. And the fourth is the animal component. If you see the income of particularly most of the some of the landless farmers and marginal and small farmers, most of their income it has to be come from the animal component, either by selling for the milk and also the selling as a meat purpose. That means to say that we have a potential animals, either starting from the backyard poultry to even Japanese quails and other things. That is a wonderful animal, particularly at the homestead farming, and particularly agri-based animals, sheep, goats, and also the cows. These are the some of the animals we have, so that at least they can keep 1 or 2 animals to generate at least the employment for the family members, and also they get some additional return, so that the migration to the nearby towns and city, it can be minimized. These are the some of the points, starting from your retaining soil on the site, and the selection of the crop, and go for the mixed crop component, the cereals, legumes, and other tuber crops also, and the go for the trees component at the wider spacing on the boundary, field boundary, and have some animal component. These are the, and also have fifth component is the water harvesting, at least minimum 1 pond should be there. This is my submission with respect to the small and marginal farmer to, if at all they want to have a climate mitigation strategy. Dhanyawad, thank you.
Very much appreciate your insights. With this, I actually go next to Bhojwait sir, because Dr. Bhojwait has worked very extensively in forestry. So what I wanted to ask you was the people have been talking about agroforestry and how it can, our agroecology, and how, this can really lead to better soil health and of course improved incomes for farmers. Would you be able to share your thoughts on, how agroforestry can actually improve both soil health and potentially improve farmer incomes?
Definitely, yes. So first of all, I like to reiterate all my fellow speakers. They said that trees are important as a system which basically fixes biomass, and then by the process of photosynthesis, and then by turnover converts into organic carbon. And everybody has said that organic carbon or carbon content is the flesh and blood of the soil health. Just before me, Dr. Madhu made a statement about what he envisions about very small farmers. And may I say, Dr. Madhu, that this particular model, as we refer to it in the literature of agriculture as well as forestry, as candy gardens or multiple gardens, you see, they are being practiced, for example, in Kerala and then in West Bengal. When you drive across the road, on both sides, you have small land holdings. And what basically Dr. Madhu was saying, so I'll make this point that already very small farmers, they are doing agroforestry, which has a combination of water pond, and they are growing agricultural crop. In the water pond, they either harvest fish, and then there are a couple of trees which are jackfruit and amla and mango tree. The tree component is also there, and they, as he has rightly said, do a multiple of crops, which are beyond the comprehension of the one farm kind of production which happens in the West in the larger form. The second is that, as I made a point right in the beginning, agroforestry, to me, probably my colleagues will agree, is growing trees in combination with agriculture crop or animals or fishery in either spatial scale or temporal scale. So that means that already the system of shifting cultivation was an agroforestry system. Unfortunately, what is happening that we are compelled by this land hunger, that's why the land has been compartmentalized into very small holdings. And therefore, I think that the community lands, as in the panchayat lands, they can be made small woodlots or forests, because they can serve as an externality to the small farms for the accumulation of biomass, water recharge, as well as the organic matter content. So definitely, and finally, what I say that which is being practiced in indigenous systems, as my colleague has also said, Dr. Madhu, that should be redone again. Travel all across Chhattisgarh and other forest areas, the tribals, they have on their meager lands, few trees of imli, amla, mahua, etc., which add not only to the overall organic component and water content, etc. That is the ecological function. But as Dr. Madhu said, in the event of failure of crop, they provide economic inputs in terms of the sale of harad, for example, or honey, or harad, and this kind of minor forest produce. So those are my thoughts on it. And now probably you will already aware, my friends, even from abroad, that all over world, tree outside forest, when I say forest, means that technically the scheduled forest, they are playing a very, very important role in terms of political security as well as economic security. And largely these trees are grown in form of agroforestry. Of course, these are, if they are large farmers, these are plantations. Otherwise, these are mixed cropping system of growing trees. As all my colleagues have said about the plantation of trees along bunds or corners of the agriculture field, and also the diversity of the trees, which may include nitrogen fixing trees, the fruit trees, and the fuel wood trees. So I personally feel that agroforestry has a major role in terms of the sustainability of the soil health vis-a-vis the climate change conditions which result into the degradation of the productivity. So trees have a major role in mitigating the effects of climate change and also sustaining the soil health. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you very, very much. We very much benefit from your deep insights and experience. My next question would be for Lee. Lee, you mentioned the importance of monitoring, and you are playing a very important role in this project, Project Unnat Kheti, with that regard. So if you could speak about how does a smallholder farmer ensure her, soil health? Are there testing tools? What are the best ways that they can approach this?
Thank you so much. And yes, this is one of my most favorite topics to talk about, monitoring soil and land health. And I think a few key principles can be applied here. As the previous speaker said, it's about the whole ecosystem. So the first part in monitoring is really about understanding the practices that are going on in the farm, right? Whether it's agroforestry, composting and application of manure, cover burning. Won't go too much into that, but making sure that we're documenting the practices that are taking place. The next is to really, was it Naveen who was talking about the multiple rhizofungi, some bacteria to fungi ratio, looking at key indicators of soil health, such as soil organic carbon, as well as physical components. So that would be erosion, compaction. And I think something that we haven't really discussed much today is around water holding capacity and the hydrologic function of soil. And this is very much related to low carbon agriculture as well, because low carbon agriculture should be holding and storing more carbon as well as more water, so that when it rains, which we all know, especially in the project sites, that rainfall is more erratic and sometimes it's more intense. So when it rains, we want that water to be absorbed into the soil like a sponge. But what happens is that if we don't have the mother organic matter holding the three brothers or sisters together, I think I have it right now, then you have water erosion. So you're actually having erosion on the surface of the soil, which is actually carrying away very fertile and biologically active soil. So a monitoring framework must be quantifiable, has to be rapid. We cannot wait years for the farmer to get that information back. So I think it's really important that we engage farmers in the monitoring process. We engage them in the soil collection process. And as we know, India has a very revolutionary soil health card. And there are several new techniques that we can use in soil monitoring, such as soil spectroscopy, robust field sampling methods that allow for statistical analysis with remote sensing that really provide feedback on soil information in a timely manner. And what I mean by timely is the information needs to be available. Maker needs it. And that decision maker could be the farmer, could be the donor, it could be the project team, any decision. Second, we need to make sure from the monitoring is in a easily accessible format, so it's understood by all of these stakeholders. So I think information is great, but it translating science into action is the goal. So at C4ECRAF, we've been implementing the Land Degradation Surveillance Framework, which aims to capture multiple indicators of soil and land health at multiple spatial scales. So it's relevant at the plot scale for the farmer, the watershed scale, the state level, and even international level. So I think it's very important that we do not see monitoring as something we do at the end of the project. It has to be part of the co-learning cycle within the project cycle, so we can all make decisions and adapt to meet the needs of the farmer. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, very much. Thank you so much, Lee. So, Dharmendra, you mentioned that we stop at FIM and there's a lot of stuff that you can do on ground, and you talked about biostimulants, etc. I'm wondering if you can give us an example of some, like a particular success story that you would like to highlight vis-a-vis, you know, adding organic carbon or, you know, sort of just overall improving soil health, because I know you work with a lot of farmers on very many innovative practices.
Yeah, actually, we are trying to exploit this natural phenomenon of photosynthesis. So it's like carbon is injected in deeper layers. So we are recommending that there should not be any monocrop at any point of time. So in nature, you don't find monocropping. So all your fields should be diverse. 8 to 12 crops should be there. So even before paddy, there is a practice called green manuring. So green manuring practice is primarily of, again, monocropping. So we replace that with the Navadhanya type of sowing, where different seed groups are sown. So in that, a family can still harvest vegetables, leafy vegetables, and there are some legumes based on the time that they have for next crop to start. So and we also have stopped incorporating the biomass. The usual practice is that the biomass has to be incorporated in the soil. What we found is 80% of what you incorporated gets lost into the soil, into the atmosphere, you know, through oxidation. So why not you feed cattle? Why not you allow cattle and graze on that? So that is how we were integrating cattle, and we are looking at that crop also as fodder. And you are slowly going into no tillage or low tillage system. Okay, so you are not overturning, disturbing the soil to a great extent. So you'll be only intervening where to the extent that is required. So cattle's health is improving, and soil structure is improving because you are not disturbing the soil. The roots that have gotten into the soil, if they are left like that, when they die also, those tunnels will remain stable. Okay. And also earthworms, their tunnels and other soil insects, those also are intact. So it creates like a soil sponge system. Okay. So in that, without much land preparation exercises and activities where you use machinery like that, tractors and all, that usage is also it's reduced to a large extent. Many farmers are sowing the next crop just like relay crop, just sowing, or some high value crops, they are dibbling. So soil disturbance is getting minimized. So in all these, what we are seeing is through plant diversity, you will have a lot of biomass. Even for mulching also, there is biomass. For example, I'll share one model that we have discussed yesterday with the African group of NGOs. So there are 2 cotton rows. In between, pearl millet, sorghum, and 1 legume crop are sown. Cotton is just 30 months old, and other crop is sown. Why? Not to harvest anything from pearl millet or sorghum. After 40 days or so, when their vegetative stage is complete, they will be chopped off and applied on the field itself. So you would have soil opened through the root activity by these new crops. Till vegetative stage, the root exudates quantity is higher. When the plant goes into maturity stage, exudates become lower in quantity. So you have maximized these root exudates in the soil, and you are using that biomass as a soil cover. So in that way, cotton crops productivity is getting boosted. So in different farming systems, we have converted all these principles into practices. These practices will require a lot of innovative thinking so that the main principle is guarded and well utilized. So we are not looking at some products as solution, packaged products as solutions, some concentrated forms of solutions. We are looking at biomass as even weeds also as a source of biomass like that. So if you are switching to high plant diversity, you will have a lot of the problems solved. The overall land productivity is improved. The way how you measure the productivity of a system is also important. We cannot just compare cotton productivity of natural farming versus conventional, because our approach is different. What we are saying to our farmers is, you have to measure how many rupees you are able to derive in a year from unit land. That should be your distance. Just don't compare with monocrop yield with your monocrop yield. That's not going to be an accurate measurement. So in all farming systems across these things, we have mandal wise, subdivision wise, block wise, GP wise farming system plan, where no month should be left fallow. They have to sow something. This clarity has come to us recently, and we are trying to scale it up. So we have some innovative farmers who have gone from 2 crops to 3 or 4 crops in 1 year. So we have to take that to all other farmers in next 4 or 5 years. It will take time, and we have encouraging models in each situation. So this is how we are looking at not just FYM. Actually, FYM, tank silt, all these vermicompost, though these are all accepted things, they involve a lot of labor and additional activity. Why not you generate all of these while the crops are growing, so that drudgery and all other efforts are minimized? So if you switch to plant biodiversity, a lot of ecosystem services you can harness.
Great. Thank you so much for that experience from the field. I'll actually open one question to everyone, and that is about, when you transition from chemical-based, your regular fertilizer-based farming to your natural farming, your chemical-free farming, there is a dip in yield. And in our conversations with farmers, almost over and over again, that has come up as the main reason for why they are reluctant to adopt the practice. So if any of you would like to just respond to, how can we avoid that dip in the yield? Is there a way to transition them without that dip, or even give them the kind of premium that would make sense for them to actually invest in that?
Yeah. So we were confronted with that question. Actually, everyone believes that it takes 3 years for yields to stabilize or be on par with conventional systems like that. So we made a survey 2 years back among our farmers who have to find out how many farmers in different crops have matched or exceeded chemical farmers' yields right from first season. So we got some numbers, many farmers, and we studied their package of practices. we found that whoever have followed all the package of practices very diligently, there is not much yield difference. Actually, all rain-fed crops perform very much better than conventional, even from season one. Whereas in paddy situation, it is difficult because of the waterlogged situation. The soil biology is slightly different. It requires some time like that. So the yields are slightly nearer, but not significantly lower in paddy situation. But all rain-fed crops, we can safely say they exceed chemical. And second, what we will tell our farmers is net incomes are important, not the quantity of yield. How much you have pushed, okay, how much yield has come, and how much income you derive. So if you look at that, even if your crop is a half a quintal less of less yield or so, you are still higher on net incomes. Okay, so that is one educative component we are. And the third is land productivity, not just crop-wise productivity. In a year, how much income you can derive. So with these things, we are able to answer and convince farmers into taking it. We are orienting them to look at this a new way of measuring things. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I have two speakers would like to contribute to this. So I'll start with Ishan, and after that, Lee, could you kindly weigh in?
Thanks, Chaya. Just adding focus on net income, and which when we talk about natural farming or low carbon agriculture, we are talking about a diversified livelihood, and which contributes to the income, and that's how the solution of the yield that you were talking about is there. And also related to the strength of the biophysical infrastructure in the village is situated. Have good water bodies, you can have some small ruminants which add significantly the income, especially for the marginal landholder. So, so a diverse system is much better than the current monocrine system, even in terms of incomes, and that should be the, I think, the focus.
Yes, I just wanted to make a complementary point that the transition from chemical agriculture is really about transitioning to a knowledge intensive agriculture. And I don't think we should be afraid to say and acknowledge that natural farming is knowledge intensive. It requires regular observation, regular care for your cropping system, diverse cropping system. Our professor Haranya was talking about animals and trees and the interaction with soil. And I just wanted to make the point that if you do not have the mother, the organic matter in the soil, you will not have a very strong response to chemicals, to fertilizers. So really, you must have a healthy functioning soil ecosystem to really have any type of long-term sustainable productivity. And it's okay to be knowledge intensive. And I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Yes, that's very valid. Thank you so much, Lee. Naveen Bhai has raised his hand, and I would just like to mention that Naveen Bhai has been very successfully steering, bio input, training and bio input centers across AKR SBI landscapes. And really, I have myself met with some of the ones that he's trained, and really, this is a transformative work that's happening. So, Naveen Bhai, please do give your comments, and I just you're welcome to please speak to some of that initiative as well.
Only point I wanted to make is when farmer transition from the current chemical intensive deep tillage kind of systems to more sustainable systems, over the period of time, within maybe 2-3 years, farmers themselves realize that their soils requires less chemicals now. So as and when soils are rehabilitated, their nutrient recycling capacity improves, their water holding capacities and all other functions improves, the soil itself start asking for less chemicals. So that is the another way to look at how transition from the chemical intensive to sustainable agriculture.
Thank you so much. We have, we're kind of coming to the closing of this conversation, but I wanted to just flag if any of the speakers would like to make any closing remarks, and then we would be ready to conclude this session. Thank you very, very much. Some great insights have emerged. Okay, great. Thank you very, very much. I mean, we are here talking about soil health on World Soil Day 2021 and, post COP26 and some of the climate emergency that surrounds us, and Dharmendra ji has put a great, new word in our vocabulary, soil emergency. We definitely have that. And all of us are working as hard as we can to work across the socio-ecological, scientific, behavioral dimensions of this project under the project Unnat Kheti. So we shall continue this discussion as we have just begun some of the work under this low carbon agriculture project, and we will circle back in with all the experts, and hopefully we can keep getting updated about what's happening, learning from each other, and build healthier soils for all our farmers.